Subscribe before the truth disappears. The hallway hummed with the sound of fluorescent tubes about to die. A black rectangle of a door, a brass peephole, and two officers whose breath frosted in the December air. The knock sounded light, almost apologetic. When it opened, everything looked ordinary. A young mother in a worn sweatshirt leaning on the frame. A man behind her with the calmness of someone who'd rehearsed it. "She's pregnant," he said, smiling at the uniforms. "Mood swings." The officers nodded. Names exchanged. "Merry Christmas." A signature on a clipboard. The door eased shut. If you paused that body camera frame at the exact moment the latch clicked, you would see a shadow pooling at the edge of the stairwell behind the couple. Just a darker dark, the kind cameras don't argue with. At the time, it meant nothing. Later, it would suck the air out of the room. By the next October, Detective Laura Hendricks had watched that 30-second exchange more times than she could count. She replayed the same corridor sound, the soft rattling of pipes, a child's muffled giggle off-screen, the casual way the officers' shoulders loosened after they wrote down the couple's names and found no broken glass, no bruises blooming in the open. She watched for the things that didn't happen. The kids the woman said were sleeping, that no one laid eyes on. The one name nobody in the house dared say out loud. The tip arrived a few minutes after sunrise on an otherwise simple Thursday. A voice that wouldn't give a name, reporting something wrong behind an empty house on East Street in New Britain. Hendricks drove with her window cracked, noting how the neighborhood's changed by block. Triple-deckers with peeling paint, a bicycle frame without wheels chained to a fence like an accusation. At the rear of the abandoned property, next to a sapling strangled by old holiday lights, she found a plastic tote. Its lid was cinched with gray tape. Fresh drag lines scarred the ground. She didn't open it. Not there, not without a team. She stood and let the taste of metal settle in her mouth while a uniformed officer took a step backward, then another. Someone asked if it could be a dead animal. Someone else swallowed hard and said nothing. When the breeze shifted, Hendricks caught it, that unmistakable pocket of air that doesn't belong outdoors. She ordered the perimeter lockdown and called it in. Back at the precinct, the case board had a photograph of a 12-year-old girl, pinned dead center. Jacqueline Mimi Torres Garcia. Straight hair pulled tight into a ponytail, the unflinching gaze kids use on school picture day. The caption line beneath said she'd been withdrawn from school in late August last year, homeschool scrawled in a mother's hurried hand. No one at the school had seen her afterward. No friends had posted selfies. No teacher had gotten a holiday card with her handwriting. There were noise complaints from 2 addresses. There was a video call from social workers that landed like a stone in a pond and sank without ripples. The board was a map of absence. The first time Hendricks read the mother's statement, it felt like a room with all the furniture jammed against the windows. The mother, Carla, said Mimi was fine and with a friend. She couldn't give the friend's last name. She couldn't recall the number. When pressed, she changed the address. When detectives went there, cousins blinked in the doorway and shrugged. The girl wasn't inside. The cousins hadn't seen her in months. The mother widened her eyes and said, "What do you mean the way you say it when you're the last person to learn your own punchline?" Later, when photographs surfaced, blurry, lit by a single bulb, showing a child's wrists bound in zip ties on a square of puppy training pads, the mother's story shifted hard. She blamed the boyfriend, Jonathan, the smiling man in the body cam footage. She said he snapped. She said there'd been an argument on the stairs. She said she was 6 months pregnant and fell hard, and he snapped. And then, her voice tangled in the transcript, she said he told her later he put her in a bag and put powder on her. The words were cheap plastic trying to hold back a flood. Jonathan's story was tidy in the way guilty stories often are. He'd only helped move a bin, he said. He didn't know what was inside. He shrugged when asked about Mimi, and nodded when asked again. He could recall the sound the tote made against the truck bed, the way it slid, the way it didn't. He admitted the smell, but not the meaning. He pointed at Carla. Carla pointed back. Their fingers shook like needles over a compass that couldn't find north. The aunt, also named Jacqueline, arrived to talk, barely keeping her eyes open, then came back sober and rethreaded her answers. She said she'd just found out everything yesterday, then admitted she hadn't seen Mimi in months. Faced with the photo, she said Jonathan had thought of the restraints, but she'd seen them. Just at the end, she said, as if cruelty was something you could set a start time on. She painted a corner of a room where a child stood so long the walls remembered it. She tried to minimize, and in doing so, measured the neglect without realizing. A neighbor filled in other lines: the banging, the sudden silence that follows it, the way shouting can fill the whole stairwell like smoke. Another described the kids wearing spring jackets in February and warming tiny hands over the car vents. She'd yell, "Stop!" that voice like she was talking to someone who wasn't there. Hendricks built the timeline like a carpenter fixes a crooked door: shave, measure, test. August, the withdrawal from school. December, the officers at the door, holiday salutations curling off into the hallway. The move from Farmington to New Britain, the tote's first journey. A spring of check boxes and unanswered calls. An earlier summer photo where Mimi's smile failed to reach her eyes. Then October. The anonymous voice and the plastic tote behind the abandoned house, resting like a secret that had grown too heavy to carry any farther.
In the interview room, Carla's voice was a pendulum. At first, she was offended by the suggestion anything was wrong. Mimi was at a friend's. Mimi would be back any day. Then, presented with the autopsy's preliminary notes indicating no recent fractures, she turned away from the story about the stairs. She said Jonathan made her do things. She said he told her when to feed, when not to, when to tie and when to untie. She said she was afraid for her other kids. She said many things, each one trying to outrun the last. "What about the night the police came?" Hendricks asked evenly, the bodycam still image laid flat on the table between them. The door opened just enough to let the officer's shoulders relax. Carla stared at the photo too long. "They come for noise," she said. "We argue sometimes. It's an apartment. The walls are thin." "Where was Mimi?" A beat stretched. "She was not home," she said finally, but the sentence broke in the middle like a cheap pencil. "We were moving," she added, "to New Britain. Fewer complaints there." In another room, Jonathan ran a hand over his jaw until the skin bloomed red. He kept talking about the tote like it was a person he hoped would forgive him. He described driving across town, past a cemetery with stones like crooked teeth. He said Carla helped lift one end. He said the lid bowed under weight when he cinched the tape. "I just did what she asked," he repeated, the phrase arranged like a charm against consequence. Hendricks didn't tell him what was waiting at East Street. She didn't have to. People like Jonathan think the world is a series of favors traded in the dark. They don't understand what dawn does to debts. The inventory team returned from the abandoned house as the late afternoon turned a rusted orange. They'd transported the tote to a controlled bay. Latches intact, visible tape seams, powder residue along edges. Powder to drown smell, to make time lie. Hendricks stood alone for a moment with the board, letting each string settle. She traced the thin red line from the December knock to the October drag marks. She pictured the officer's polite exit, the way you back out of a room to give people privacy without realizing that privacy can be a weapon. She pictured the children who were seen and the one who wasn't. She pictured the corner of a room and the way silence learns your name. "Detective," a sergeant called from the bay, voice careful. "We're ready." She followed the corridor past the evidence cage, the hum of the air system flattening the world to something sterile and unreal. The tote sat on a stainless steel table under white light, its taped edges clean and deliberate. A camera blinked red. A tech waited with a box cutter, knuckles pale. Another held the lid. Hendricks nodded. The blade whispered along the tape. The lid gripped itself, then loosened. The room felt suddenly too small, like a theater when the curtain begins to rise and you realize the play is not one you can unseen. As the first latch snapped up, a brittle crack that ricocheted through the bay, Hendricks' phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit with a push alert from records, a bodycam timestamp match, December 29th, the same apartment. Documentation that the officers had stood within feet of a locked basement door the woman never mentioned. "Detective," the tech said quietly, eyes rimmed with water he wouldn't let fall. Hendricks didn't look away from the tote. She didn't check the alert again. She placed her palm on the lid as if steadying a frightened animal. "Now," she said. When they finally lifted the lid and the first breath of air escaped, everything changed.
The first rule of truth is that it never stays buried. Detective Laura Hendricks stood in the sterile evidence bay, her gloves trembling slightly as the first layer of tape peeled away from the plastic tote. The hiss of the adhesive releasing sounded like a slow exhale, one the entire department seemed to hold with her. When the lid came off, time slowed. Inside was a patchwork of plastic, fabric, and something almost ceremonial in its arrangement. Trash bags, bed sheets, a scatter of white powder like snow that didn't melt. Beneath it all, the unmistakable outline of a child's form. She didn't breathe. She didn't speak. She only nodded once to the forensic team and stepped backward into the hallway. Outside the room, the corridor smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Hendricks pressed her knuckles against her lips. She'd been doing this long enough to know she couldn't afford to get used to it, but she also couldn't afford to fall apart. Somewhere, above the hum of the vents, she heard the distant sound of someone's pen scratching across a form. The machine of justice was already moving. Within 48 hours, the name on every board in the precinct was the same: Carla Garcia. 32, mother of 4, 1 unborn, residing most recently in a low-rise complex on Farmington Avenue. No prior felonies, sporadic complaints from neighbors, noise, shouting, suspected neglect. Her boyfriend, Jonathan Nanita, 38, handyman, prior domestic calls but nothing that ever stuck. Then the sister, Jacqueline Garcia, the aunt, occasional babysitter, part-time CNA, known for drinking but not for violence. Hendricks leaned over the table as the team traced out the timeline. August 2024, school withdrawal. December, bodycam visit. Spring, address change. October 2025, the tote. 4 people saw something, and nobody saw everything, Hendricks said. Detective Neil Pearson, her partner, flipped through the bodycam screenshots. "You think she was already gone when they did the wellness call?" Hendricks studied the photo. Carla at the door, eyes a little too wide. Jonathan in the background, performing calm. "I think they knew she wasn't coming back." The interviews began with Carla. She sat at the table in an oversized hoodie, fingers worrying the hem like a rosary. Her first story was almost gentle. "Mimi was staying with friends. They texted. She was fine. Maybe she was mad at her mother. Maybe she'd come home soon." But when Hendricks showed her the autopsy results, malnutrition, old bruising, no recent fractures, the mask began to crack. "She wouldn't eat. She was stubborn. She'd hide food. You don't understand. She was difficult." Hendricks didn't flinch. "You stopped giving her food for 2 weeks. That's what you said later." Carla's eyes darted. "Jonathan told me to. He said she was bad." "What did you do when she cried?" Carla's voice went small. "He said not to listen." Behind the glass, Pearson watched the feed. "She's trying to make herself the victim, but she's too calm. That's not fear, that's guilt." Hendricks leaned in, lowering her voice. "Carla, when the officers came that night, December 29th, you told everyone was fine. Why didn't you say Mimi was missing?" Carla's shoulders slumped. "Because she wasn't missing. She was still there." The room went silent. "Where?" Hendricks asked quietly. She stared at the table. "In the basement." Jonathan's interview was next. He swaggered in like a man convinced the truth was negotiable. "I didn't kill nobody," he said before they even started the recorder. "You taped the lid, twice. You smelled it, you still didn't ask?" He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "She told me it was old meat. Ever smell that? It's bad." "You drove it to New Britain, behind a house that wasn't yours." He shrugged. "She said the trash pickup was better there." Hendricks slid a photo across the table. Bodycam stills, the same apartment. "That night," she said, "you told the officers everything was fine, but she was already gone. You looked calm. How does a man look that calm standing over a dead child?" His jaw flexed. "Because it wasn't my kid," he muttered. "Maybe," Hendricks said, "but it was still a human being. And now she's in a box because both of you pretended she wasn't." For a moment, the room filled with the hum of the fluorescent light. Then he whispered, "You don't know what she was like. That kid, she made everything fall apart." Hendricks leaned back, her voice cold. "So you fixed it?" He didn't answer. The aunt came last. Jacqueline arrived trembling, reeking of cheap vodka and guilt. At first, she claimed she hadn't known anything, but when Hendricks showed her the photographs, the corner of the living room, the training pads, the zip ties, her facade collapsed. "She made her stand there all day sometimes, said she needed to learn. Jonathan would yell. He'd say no food until she listened." "Did you try to stop them?" "I tried once," she whispered. "He told me if I said another word, I'd be next. So I took pictures. I thought maybe I could show someone." "Why didn't you?" "I didn't think anyone would believe me. She was my sister. I didn't want to destroy the family." "You already did," Hendricks said softly.
The puzzle started to close. The starvation, the restraints, the tote, all of it told a timeline more honest than any confession. But one question remained. Who made the call? The anonymous voice that led them to East Street. Hendricks played the voicemail again. Female, steady, low. "There's a smell behind the old white house," the voice said. "You need to check it before someone moves it again." Then a click. No background noise, no traceable ID. Pearson frowned. Someone who knew the body was being moved. Someone close. Hendricks thought of Carla's other children, the ones still alive, silent during the interviews, eyes darting like they'd memorized rules no one wrote down. She remembered one of them whispering as social workers led them away, "Mimi's cold." The statement had chilled her then. Now it sounded like knowledge. "Could one of the kids have called?" Pearson asked. "Maybe," Hendricks said. "Or someone who finally ran out of silence." 2 days later, Hendricks returned to the old apartment. The air was different, emptier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. She descended the creaking stairs into the basement. There, in the concrete corner, a square discoloration marked where something heavy had rested for a long time. The smell was faint, but unforgettable. She crouched, running her gloved hand over the patch. A faint residue of white powder clung to the surface. She straightened, staring at the pipes overhead. The light flickered once, then steadied. The sound came from behind her, a soft creak of a door she hadn't opened. She spun, flashlight slicing through the dark. Just the empty shape of the furnace, the dangling cord of a pull chain. But there, near the wall, she noticed a small detail the forensics team had missed. A child's drawing half glued to the concrete by dust and time. Crayon lines forming a crude house, a stick figure family, and one small figure drawn outside the door, holding a blue balloon. Underneath, in faint, careful letters, a name. Mimi. Hendricks felt her throat tighten. She folded the drawing carefully into an evidence sleeve. Upstairs, her radio crackled with Pearson's voice. "Laura, you're gonna want to get back here," he said. "We just pulled a message off Carla's old phone. It was deleted, but tech recovered it." "What kind of message?" "It recorded something, time-stamped the night of December 29th. Hendricks froze. "The same night as the bodycam visit?" "Yeah, and, Laura, you need to hear what's on it." The line clicked dead. The basement light flickered again, throwing her shadow against the wall where the drawing had been. For a moment, it looked like she was standing outside the door too, just like the little figure with the blue balloon. And in that second, Detective Laura Hendricks realized the tape they just recovered might not only reveal what happened to Mimi, it might prove that someone else in that house was still lying. The recording played through a small speaker, the sound hollow and warped with static. A woman's voice, steady, low, careful, filled the interrogation room. "Don't make noise. They'll come again if you scream." Then a pause. The faint shuffle of footsteps. Somewhere in the background, a child sobbing. A man's voice muttered something unintelligible, then a door slammed. The recording ended there. Detective Laura Hendricks sat frozen, fingers laced under her chin. The timestamp glowed on the screen. December 29th, 2024, 9:42 p.m. The same night the officers knocked. The same night Carla smiled for the camera. "How did we miss this?" Pearson muttered, standing over her shoulder. "We didn't," Hendricks said quietly. "We just didn't know what we were looking at." The tech team traced the file's origin. It wasn't saved under Carla's name or Jonathan's. It was sent from a hidden account tied to a prepaid phone purchased weeks earlier. The message had been deleted minutes after recording, but the metadata told its own story. Recorded inside the Farmington apartment on Carla's phone. Hendricks looked up. So she knew what she was doing. She recorded it. Maybe for leverage, maybe to frame him later. Or maybe someone else sent it. Someone who wanted it found. He meant the children. That night, Hendricks returned home but didn't turn on the lights. The city outside was a muted hum of sirens and wind. She poured a cup of coffee that went cold untouched, staring at the case file spread across her kitchen table. 4 faces stared back. The mother, the boyfriend, the aunt, and the child who never had a chance. Mimi's crayon drawing lay in an evidence sleeve under the lamp. The house, the blue balloon, the little figure outside the door. Hendricks traced the lines with her eyes. Children draw what they can't say. Sometimes that's all that's left of truth. She reached for her phone. A text from Pearson. "Call me. The aunt just changed her statement, again." Jacqueline Garcia sat trembling in the interview room. This time, her eyes were dry. "It wasn't just them," she said. "I told you before. They made me help, but it wasn't always Jonathan. Sometimes it was her." "Carla?" asked Hendricks. "She wasn't scared of him. That's what you don't understand. She liked the control. She'd test Mimi, see how long she could go without crying." "And the recording?" Hendricks asked. "That night she wanted proof. She said if he ever left her, she'd show the police and say it was all his fault." Hendricks' stomach turned. She staged it. "Not the abuse," the aunt whispered. "That was real. But the recording, she wanted a version where it sounded like he was the monster. She didn't think anyone would ever hear it for what it was." Hendricks exchanged a glance with Pearson behind the glass. "So who sent it?" Jacqueline looked up slowly. "Maybe Mimi did. Before, you know." The detectives stared, confused. "She had a tablet," the aunt continued. "Old one. Carla thought it was broken, but Mimi used it when she could. She knew how to record. I think she left something." The tablet was recovered from an evidence box that had already been logged and sealed. A cracked pink case, battery dead, screen scratched. When the techs powered it up, the logo flickered, then settled on a single video file, unnamed. Hendricks played it with her breath held. The picture shook, dark. A corner of a living room wall. A faint whimper. Then a woman's voice, Carla's. "You think I won't do it? You think you can lie to me?" A thud. A sob. A man's voice, "Stop, Carla, stop!" Then silence. The timestamp read December 18th, 2024. 11 days before the bodycam visit. Mimi had hidden the device under a stack of toys, the recording set to upload automatically to a free cloud account when connected to Wi-Fi. When the police visited that night, the signal had been live. She had tried to save herself. Carla's final interview lasted 3 hours. She came in without makeup, without excuses. Hendricks pressed play on the tablet's video, let it run until the first sob, and then stopped it. "That's your voice," she said. Carla stared at the table. "You don't know what it's like, detective. Jonathan, he pushed me. He said she hated me. Said she'd take my other kids away. I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to starve her?" Hendricks snapped. The room went still. "You didn't mean to leave her in the basement? You didn't mean to let her rot while you smiled for a Christmas greeting on camera?" Carla flinched. "You don't understand. She was gone before I even realized—" "No," Hendricks said, voice low. "You realized. You just didn't care." The mother's face hardened into something cold. "You think I'm the only one? Everyone ignored her. The neighbors, the school, even your department came to my door and walked away." The words cut. Hendricks didn't answer because she couldn't. Carla smiled faintly. "We all killed her," she said. The trial dragged on for months. Carla and Jonathan sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, glaring through glass. The aunt testified, hands shaking. The jury cried when the tablet footage played. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty on all counts for Carla Garcia and Jonathan Nanita. Murder with special circumstances, conspiracy, cruelty, and tampering. Life sentences without parole. The aunt received 20 years for her role in concealing the crime. But justice, Hendricks knew, never truly feels clean. The courtroom emptied, reporters filed their stories, and the world moved on. She visited the old property once more, months later. The winter had faded. Grass grew where the tote had been found. Children rode bicycles down the cracked street, their laughter echoing where silence had once lived. Hendricks stood alone by the fence, watching the wind play through the branches. Something caught her eye near the base of the tree. A scrap of blue plastic, half buried in the dirt. She knelt and pulled it free. It was the string from a balloon, sun-bleached, but still bright blue. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she imagined a little girl standing in that yard, holding it, looking toward the sky. Maybe somewhere, that's the moment Mimi kept for herself, the one thing her mother couldn't take. Hendricks slipped the string into her pocket, turned toward her car, and drove away without sirens. Because some cases don't end with justice. They end with silence that finally speaks. If you thought this one was wild, wait for the next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss when the next truth surfaces.